Welcome to your weekly dose of NFL Jibber Jabber, the Club Dub Football Podcast. Remember to follow on Twitter, Insta, and watch video shows each week on YouTube. Want to get in touch? That's easy. Message through social or email clubdubpodcast@mail.com.
Welcome to the Club Dub Football Podcast,
where the only question is,
does your team make it into the club?
Can he get in? No, he cannot!
The guys are ready, so let's hand over to Rob Rose, JB, PB and Aldrin, and get on with the show.
Hi gents.
Hi Rob.
And hi listenership. Welcome to another rip-roaring Club Dub Football Podcast, where we basically continue to make a mockery of things. How easy would you think it would be halfway through the season when we've got a good back catalogue of game film to watch for each and every team in the league to accurately predict a winner in a game in the last few days? Maybe this week is the week where our season's fortunes turn. And let's start by going around the room, and I would love to get your thoughts, gentlemen, on the second in a row, really, an utterly balmy week when it comes to professional football. What were your takeaways? Aldrin, kick us off.
I thought it was quite a good week, and you guys might disagree with me, but I quite like seeing a blowout victory every now and then where somebody goes and puts a 40 burger on another team, and I thought we saw quite a few of those. I think the Bills looked like the Bills again a little bit. The Cowboys, I mean, that was a one-sided game if ever I've seen one. And then the Patriots doing a number on the Browns. So, yeah, I quite like those 40-point games. I'm quite partial to them.
So 40 burgers is Aldrin's takeaway. PB, how about you? What did you take away from the week?
Underwhelming performances, I think, from a number of highly rated teams. Obviously.
Oh, are you a Bucks fan, Phil? You've not mentioned.
Well, yeah. Less said about that in a minute, the better. But, you know, not just the Bucks. You're absolutely amazed to see the Cardinals go down so badly to the Panthers. You know, even without Kyler Murray, you'd have thought they'd have enough still to beat the Panthers the way that they've been playing, especially without their quarterback, you know, with PJ Walker coming in. Cam Newton obviously signed off the street and, you know, I think he's got 2 touchdowns, didn't he? A rush and a pass, something like that.
In his first 2 plays, yeah.
Yeah. You know, who would have predicted that 7 days ago? So anything can happen in a week in the NFL, I guess. But yeah, some interesting scores, you know, Lions, Steelers. I thought it was an interesting week, but because teams were underwhelming rather than anybody particularly, you know, making any highlight reel plays.
And JB.
I think my big takeaway for the week is a shout out to the hardest job connected to the National Football League this season. And that is being 4 people on a podcast that pick which teams are going to win games. Because this season, we still cannot accurately predict which teams are going to be good week to week. I will say with the exception of the Lions, sorry Lions fans, because the only consistency is they're never going to win. And I think that draw with the Steelers says more about the Steelers than it does the Lions. If Mason Rudolph is the future for the Steelers, that future is a bleak post-apocalyptic one full of zombies like you'd see in The Walking Dead or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's hard to really add to what you guys said other than, you know, I think both the Bucks and Cardinals fell foul of turnovers. And I think, you know, the Bucks have a bit more chance with Brady under center to come back from deficits than Colt McCoy and the Cardinals. I think when you know he's about to throw the ball and the run is pretty much taken away from an offense, you're going to struggle against any professional sports teams. But God, the Cardinals looked incredibly ordinary. The only weird thing really, though, is as much as we still had the crazy results this week, the crazy results from last week, you know, teams like the Bills going down. We've been talking about the funk that, you know, the Chiefs have been in. We talked about what a disappointing result it was for the Cowboys against the Broncos. Obviously, they all, you know, bounced back. Has anybody got a Cowboys-like performance in them having come off the back of such a heavy defeat? The Cardinals, the Raiders, the Buccaneers, I don't know, are any of these teams about to surprise us? Let's roll on to this week and try and make eye-popping predictions. And Aldrin.
So my game of the week this week is the Green Bay Packers against the Minnesota Vikings. And I think this is maybe a lot closer of a game than you might ordinarily think. I think going on the last maybe 6 or 7 weeks or so, you'd probably say that the Packers were the dominant team and that you'd expect an Aaron Rodgers-led offense to get the win. But I think for me, the Vikings have been kind of quietly good enough. I think they're very much like their quarterback in that they do enough and they're not flashy necessarily. But I think the Packers-Seahawks game said quite a lot, really. I don't think Aaron Rodgers really ever got going particularly well. They only put 17 points up and had the ball a heck of a lot in order to maybe put up some more. And they've subsequently lost Aaron Jones with an MCL injury. And on the flip side, I think the Vikings, like I said, the Vikings are sneaky good and they're a tough opponent. And particularly based on the history of Dalvin Cook running against the Green Bay Packers front, he often puts up a heck of a lot of yards and a heck of a lot of fantasy points for those that have him in their fantasy teams. I think he's gone over 120 yards in 3 of the last 4. And certainly the Packers run defense doesn't feel like a team that's going to slow that down much. Justin Jefferson got going last week as well. And that's always a good sign when he gets rolling. Again, on the other side, the Packers pass defense was pretty good. I think they kept Russell Wilson in check nicely. And I think to the point that DK Metcalf had his little outburst against the corner that had pretty much shut him down all game and got himself thrown out. So, there's signs there that they could be strong enough. And obviously, if you put the ball back in Aaron Rodgers' hands, that gives any Green Bay team, a chance when you're giving the ball back to what is going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. So I feel like it could be a close one, but I do think it might go against maybe the expected win. And I kind of feel like the Vikings might sneak it, but I don't know what you guys think.
Well, I think there's a couple of interesting points there. Firstly, Kirk Cousins, a lot better on the road this year. He's 12 touchdowns, no interceptions on the road. The only problem I really see facing the Vikings is actually the Packers defense rather than the Packers offense. I mean, the Packers defense, 6th overall, but I mean, top 5 really for all the stats with the exception of red zone defense. And I just think that, it's been a tale of Aaron Rodgers not having to do a great deal to win games. There have been a couple of good performances. The Cardinals' performance, I thought, was particularly good with not many of his supporting cast around him. But yeah, I can see this being low scoring. And when it's low scoring, I'm kind of with you, Aldrin. I don't think the difference is going to be a great deal. It's probably going to be a score either way. I do favour the Packers, but I'm with you. It's not by a lot. Actually, if the Vikings' home form was their road form, I'd have very easily called this one the other way around.
I think the news that we got today of Aaron Jones being out for at least a week, maybe a week or two, is I think going to be very interesting to see how that affects the Packers, because Aaron Rodgers doesn't look like the kind of quarterback who you want to put the game on his shoulders right now. He's not showing those same performances that he did last year, or that kind of the MVP all universe level plays that we've seen from him before. So I think that would be interesting to watch from the Packers. I think the defense is probably the unit you would count on or want to be more consistent. For the Vikings, I think Kirk Cousins is the Icarus of quarterbacks, because I think he is continually flying too close to the sun in terms of how he performs. And there's going to be a week where he's going to come tumbling down, and it could be this week. But I think one of the things the Vikings have done well the last couple of weeks is recognize that actually, even what the Vikings have done is they've worked out what Kevin Stefanski worked out a year ago. Kirk Cousins is best with a run game where you can use play action. So we've seen great performances from Dalvin Cook, who is probably the best running back in the league currently. I think if you like, Alvin Kamara's injured, hasn't been doing that well. Derrick Henry's obviously out. I'd put Cook up there as probably the best. And Matheson, kind of the backup that they've got, is really performing well in kind of the spot duty they're calling on. So I think Vikings having a run game versus the Packers not having a run game, I think it is a bit close to call. I think it all depends on if we see the trademark Kirk Cousins self-destruction or the customary Aaron Rodgers relax, I'm actually a really good quarterback game.
This is another one of those where you think coming into the week, the Packers are the stronger team. They're 8-2, are they? And you think, well, you know, they're going to blow away the Vikings, but the Vikings just beat the Chargers, who had looked, you know, like a potential deep playoff team over the last few weeks. So it's, I think you're right, JB. It's maybe closer than it appears to be, especially with the loss of Aaron Jones. I personally still think the Packers will have enough. You know, they kept the Seahawks off the scoreboard. So whether Aaron Rodgers is a guy that you want to put the team on his back and you know, sling them through a shootout, it probably doesn't really matter as long as your defense is playing lights out, which they are. So the Vikings are just one of those inconsistent teams, aren't they, this year, you know, as you mentioned earlier. And I think they're so up and down. You know, they had a good win last week. So can they capitalize for a change and take that momentum into this week? Or is it going to be the same old Vikings story where they're just so inconsistent that they come in and it looks like an entirely different team this week?
So there seem to be a few themes, Aldrin. A couple of us picking out the Packers on defense. Still questions, however many years into what is a pretty strong resume he's built there, Kirk Cousins as an NFL quarterback, but still some doubts about what he can do against the very best. So we as a group, I think collectively have the 8-2 Packers having enough, but it's over to you. Who are you going to put into Club Dub?
Well, I'm going to buck that trend, and I'm going to bank it on the historic game that Dalvin Cook had last time he played the Packers with 163 yards and 3 touchdowns, and predict similar. So I'm going to put the Vikings into Club Dub.
So in a year of shocks, or certainly a month of shock results, the way we're going to tackle this and improve our record of picking winners is pick a 4-5 Vikings team against the 8-2 Packers. Of course we are. That is the route to success.
Sounds like something we'd do. Yeah.
It sounds like something we do indeed. So JB, follow that.
I have decided that we are going to take a stroll to the Carolinas, and we're going to talk about the Washington football team and the Carolina Panthers that are somehow unexpectedly, but also familiarly playing Cam Newton at quarterback. And there was, I said this to Rob just before Red Zone kicked off yesterday, that there was a tweet I'd seen that people were saying, if Cam Newton plays well enough, could you see him replacing Sam Darnold and starting for the Panthers next year? And I said to Rob, with all due respect to former league MVP Cam Newton, he actually needs to prove he can play well first. And then Cam Newton had 2 touches of the ball and got a touchdown with both of them. So what do I know? And I understand that we're talking about a very specific package of plays that were set up there. And they did lean on PJ Walker quite heavily, who had a decent game. Wasn't spectacular, wasn't good, wasn't bad. He was decent and managed to make up for take advantage rather of the errors that the Arizona Cardinals made. Sorry, Rob. So I think this week it's going to be interesting to see if they continue to do that and maybe run what we've seen the Saints do with kind of starting quarterback and then Taysom Hill coming in. Could be a runner, could be there to throw, could be there as a decoy, whatever they're going to do. And maybe Matt Rule's going to kind of flex his creative muscles a little bit and kind of work in an offense where you're not really sure what's going to happen. It's probably like a reference to like a mythical figure that you could use here, but I'll leave one of the other guys to fill that in. From a Washington point of view, we saw over the weekend, they confirmed, I think, that Ryan Fitzpatrick's not coming back this season, which kind of means it's going to be Taylor Heineke's team. And again, he's not terrible. He's not great. He's not amazing. You could see him beating out some quarterbacks for the job, but then you could also see him potentially not getting in against others. But what I think really showed in the game yesterday was how much improved that Washington defense was. They're going to be suffering from the fact that I think Chase Young, they've announced, has torn his ACL. So he's done for the season. But there are still a lot of very good pieces in that defense who play very well together. Kind of everybody plays very well off each other, and they know where they need to be to do what they need to do. Which is, again, something that the Panthers have been known for over the past few years. So I think it's going to be a very interesting game to see who lines up, who kind of takes control of their franchise. Does Cam step in for the Panthers and be like, no, this was my team once, this is my team again? Does Walker kind of say, actually, you know what, lads, I was here first and I'm actually good enough to do this? And does Heineke kind of put his stamp on the football team and kind of be like, well, it's my team now. It's going to be my team next season and the season after that and the season after that.
There was a great bit of commentary yesterday watching the games, and I want to say that, well, I think it's probably likely that it's Tony Romo. And they were talking about, when you have star-studded football teams, how do you keep people happy? And the conversation went on to coaching, and then it also went on to, if you're on the field a lot and you're converting, a lot on third down and you're putting together long drives, well, offensively, that means that a lot of key pieces can still get touches. They can still have an impact on the game. And the weird thing is, do you know what? Being a quarterback who comes on inside the 5-yard line, deep in the red zone, you can imagine that really suiting Cam Newton. I mean, Cam Newton is, incredibly limited in my mind in terms of what he can do at this point in his career. But we saw it with New England last season. What he can do is he can cause you a lot of problems in short yardage situations, particularly in the red zone, because he's such a big-bodied runner, as well as, somebody who's got reasonable arm talent. Do you know, the other thing from a Panthers perspective is they just needed a bit of get up and go, right? It kind of felt like it had got up and kind of went with Darnold. It kind of felt like they were overthinking, trying too hard, making a mess in simple, straightforward situations. And as much as I still rate Darnold, I don't know, I think it's probably a coin flip as to if it's not Cam Newton playing for Carolina next season, it could very easily not be Sam Darnold either. But then you've got Washington, a very brave football team, a team that don't mind taking chances. Taylor Heineke, the great thing about Heineke is, even though he's not a great quarterback, he doesn't believe that. He'll still launch the ball. He'll still try and do things that ultimately I don't think his skill set would enable him to do with any great regularity. But do you know what? Don't you want that? In ultimately a backup quarterback who's now the start for the rest of the year, go and be brave and go and play with a team who are more than happy, to run through walls and see what happens. I do think Chase Young will be a huge miss for them. You can carry those kind of losses for a couple of downs, a couple of series, a couple of games or longer. I think they might struggle.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But then it could be a bit of a rallying cry for the team. Often you might see that the team's talisman goes down and they all kind of rally around the rest of the unit. And taking that focal point away, I think teams probably go in and game plan and think, well, Chase Young's the threat on that defensive line. So, what can we do to kind of mitigate that, get the ball out quickly, force runs the other direction. Now it kind of opens up the playbook a little bit. So, are they able to kind of run to the left as well as the right and all that kind of stuff, run where Chase Young would be, hold the ball a little bit longer in the pocket because you haven't got an elite pass rusher coming at you. So it's interesting. Washington were a 2-6 team coming into the day yesterday. Who would have picked them to come out Sunday? Sorry, who would have picked them to come out 3-6? The Eagles are only one win ahead of them after they won at the weekend at 4-6. So from a potential basement dweller in their division, it looks a little bit more rosier for them. And the Panthers, it's just inconsistency throughout, isn't it? It's another team just like the Vikings this season. The Panthers started with 3-0 and then lost 3 straight after that. It's a real, it's a real up and down season, a real a pick 'em every week, which is great, for for fans to watch, and obviously not fans of the team, but for a neutral fan to watch a lot of these games and really not know coming into the game who's going to win is an absolutely fantastic spectacle.
For me, I don't know. I think it's always interesting when the best part of both teams is the defense, and I think that's very much the case in this game. I think the Panthers D is again sneaky good. I think they're a good unit. They're just on the field too often in those games where they've been poor, is because they're just on the field so often because the offense has been throwing picks left, right, and centre. So I think if that Carolina offense can just be efficient, and that's certainly what they seem to be now that Christian McCaffrey's back in the lineup. I think you can't undersell the importance of him. I think he, did a number on the cards, really. And he's kind of the linchpin. So if they can just be a bit more efficient, run the offense through him, slow and steady up the field, then their defense has enough to slow and stop what is, in truth, a fairly ordinary, I would even say poor Washington offense. But, it could, again, the consistency is their problem. So it could be an absolute flip of a game and Washington could run riot. So, yeah, an interesting pick.
So if those are our thoughts, and they're a bit mixed, it comes to you, JB, as this is your game of the week, to tell us which of these teams finds their way into Club Dub.
One thing, like my theme a lot of weeks is talking about like consistencies and inconsistencies and things like that. And if the 2006 film Superman Returns is potentially the most inconsistent of the DC films, I think this week we will see Superman return and lead the Carolina Panthers to victory. I am backing Cam Newton. I am backing those Panthers.
Utterly horrendous. I've had enough of Cam Newton. But anyway, let's move on. I may be a bit sick of Carolina Panther chatter. Matt Rule's quite likeable, though. I mean, two teams who feel like a quarterback away, and maybe that'll give us a great game come Sunday. So 2 down means 2 to go. And PB, I'm throwing over to you.
So for me, I think there's some really interesting games this week. But for me, I'm going for the Jets versus the Dolphins. And I think last week we talked about the Patriots revival and whether they were going to usurp the Bills as topping the division. And I think actually staying in that division this week and looking at the bottom two teams in the division is going to throw up an interesting game. And if you look at the Jets' performance against the Bills at the weekend, it was almost like the Mike White bubble burst a little bit. He made some bad decisions with the football. And the Bills are a good team. They're one of the top teams in the NFL. So I don't think there was ever a realistic expectation that the Jets would beat them. Having said that, the Jags did. But for me, it's just all the quarterback controversy talk of whether they'll stick with Mike White if when Zach Wilson does come back, or whether they'll go back to Wilson, I think is over now. I think that they will definitely go back to Wilson. And this is an interesting week to come in off 2 losses against a Dolphins team who deceived to flatter, for lack of a better expression. They've got 2 wins on the bounce now. So the Jets are coming in off 2 losses. The Dolphins are coming in off 2 wins, having also looked like a bad team all year. To then come to Thursday Night Football this week and beat a really good Baltimore Ravens team, who didn't play well, don't get me wrong. But you would argue that the Ravens are one of the contenders. Who would have picked the Dolphins to beat them? So 22-10 is a convincing beating. And, if you look at the scoreline, Brissett started the game and came out. Tagovailoa went in with his fractured finger. Brissett was ready to come back in, but Flores decided that he wanted to keep Tagovailoa in there, and it worked out for them in the end. He's still not probably the quarterback that they want him to be and expected him to be when they drafted him, but eking out wins like that in tough games, on prime time is obviously going to do him the world of good. I don't think either of these teams are going to make the playoffs, but it's who's going to have the kind of strongest run in, and who's going to have another high draft pick and reset ready again for next season. If that's the Jets, for example, if the Jets lose this one and they go, get another high draft pick next year, do they take Wilson? Do they take another quarterback to, and say, oh, Wilson's not the guy, or do they stick with Wilson and get some other bits around him? It's an interesting thing. And with the Dolphins, who knows what's going to happen with them? Is Tunga Vailoa going to be their quarterback next year? It's going to be an interesting game. It's a tough one to pick a winner as well. The Dolphins are on the up in the last 2 weeks. The Jets are on the down in the last 2 weeks. But as we've seen, any given Sunday, anything can happen.
I feel like the Jets have been on their way down for the last 17 or 18 years. So, no. They had the Rex Ryan NFC Championship game, didn't they? Maybe even that. Do you know what? I'll be really quick. I think it's an interesting game rather than a good game. I would imagine if I had to sit and watch all of it, I'm not sure how thrilled I would be. It might be one to just follow on Red Zone come the weekend. But I will say this. You made an interesting point about Tua. He's not been great. You said he's probably not the quarterback they maybe thought they were drafting. We've not really seen enough from him. But I think the guy deserved a good storyline, didn't he? I think he's been playing under under a cloud or under the shadow of all these trade rumors. And I mean, there's enough out there to suggest they aren't really trade rumors. There were some pretty serious discussions. And I think to come in, and to relieve Brissett and to play through an injury and deliver a primetime win. I think we talked about Carolina being able to, turn something on its head and maybe get themselves out of a funk with Cam Newton. Maybe Tua just, maybe they deserve a bit of feel good in Miami. It's a disappointing season, however you look at it. I think they'd have gone into this year thinking they would have been competing with the Bills. And you said it, Phil, they're not. But you know what? Maybe Tua strings a few games together and maybe it changes the complexion.
I maybe don't see it as close as you seem to see it, Phil. I mean, I think the Jets are awful and are going to persist to be awful throughout the year, apart from the very random games where they'll turn up. But generally speaking, I think they're a pretty shoddy team all through on offense and defense. The Dolphins, if the defense that turned up against the Ravens, even if half of that turns up against the Jets, I think they'll come away with several turnovers. The one weird thing is that I felt last year that Flores was, a really great coach and really had things organised. There felt like a real team spirit and a camaraderie. And this year that seems to have all gone to pot a little bit. I don't think you've got, very happy stars, I guess. You've got Xavier Howard, who kicked and screamed all off-season wanting a new contract, finally got it and has underperformed, although arguably had probably his best game in a long time against the Ravens. But the weird thing for me is the way they're handling the quarterback situation. And I appreciate that, if we're all honest, Tua isn't the quarterback that they were hoping that they were going to get when they drafted him. I think Rob said that, and I think that's fair. I certainly agree that he's probably not going to be the guy long term. But ultimately, they stuck with him, and it just seems weird that you go into every game not really knowing if it's Brissett's team or if it's Tua's team.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily a race to the bottom, but in the case of the Dolphins, it's a race to not be as much of a disappointment as people were expecting. My views don't really drift that far from what you guys have said, so I haven't got an incredible amount to add into it. I do think this season and how it ends as we kind of approach the second half of it is going to say a lot about what kind of coach Flores is. And I'm going to say the Jets have been the Jets, which is an incredibly disrespectful thing to say to players that you would hope are going out every week and playing the absolute best that they can. But by and large, I don't think that's what you can say about all of the Jets. I think there are some people who are really trying. Mike White had a fantastic first game, and since then has not had a fantastic game, but he's going out and you can see him put in the effort. He is trying to bring that team along. And what's the saying about a man's desire outreaches its grasp or something like that? I think that's what it is. I think victory is there in front of the Jets, but unfortunately the talent to reach out and get it just isn't there at the moment. And again, we're looking at a Jets team that's potentially going to be in the top 5 for draft picks next season, and potentially looking at, well, how are we going to start again? Go
on, Phil. I mean, I don't know. If you're about to say the New York Jets, I'll be gobsmacked, but anything is possible this NFL season. Go on, who's going in Club Dub?
No, I'm not going to be upsetting you quite like that. I think we've all gone for a clean sweep in this one, and I am putting the Miami Dolphins into Club Dub this week.
I still think the best thing the Miami Dolphins have done is Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. They really need to show something. You make an interesting point, Aldrin. Is Flores going to be under pressure at the end of this season? You know, I don't think he will. And I think there will be a number of other teams who pull the trigger before, you know, the front office of Miami start looking for a new head coach, but it wasn't the season any of them predicted, was it? So interesting game to pick, Phil. I love it, which means you now land with me to round this out. And I have wrangled internally with my pick for this week's game, and I have gone for the game of the week that I truly think is the game of the week, the Kansas City Chiefs against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the reason for my internal wrangling is obviously I spent the best part of 10 minutes on last week's podcast telling everybody why the Chiefs weren't about to get it right, and why the Chiefs just suddenly turning on the boosters, turning on the jets and returning to be an NFL force just wasn't about to happen. Only, of course, in a season like this to be proved wrong by Patrick Mahomes, who throws 5 touchdowns and no pick in arguably one of his best ever games, let alone his best game this season. So we've seen the Cowboys do something similar. We've seen them bounce back from a horrible defeat to the Broncos. But ultimately, where are we here? I think the Chiefs have had a good game and have, you know, ultimately shown that their ceiling is still very high. The Cowboys, I mean, I know we are only a week removed from what was a really humbling and frankly a dreadful loss against the Broncos. But are they still as consistent an NFL team as we have seen? I mean, you know, JB, you said it, you know, show us some consistency, somebody. But the Cowboys, the Packers, the Cardinals, as much as they've had odd results in the last couple of weeks, have been largely consistent through the season. And I also think that when you look at the Cowboys, a bit like the Chiefs, they've got real star power. I mean, I know we've always talked about it on offense. They've got a great quarterback. They've got a great running back, 2 great running backs, I think. I think you can add Pollard. The Chiefs have proven that they have this really high ceiling again. You know, I consider myself proven wrong by, you know, supreme talent that is Patrick Mahomes. The Cowboys have been pretty consistent this season. You know, the Broncos game is definitely the blot. But I mean, otherwise, they are a team that have been playing well. They are a team that has absolute star power now on both sides of the ball. I mean, Diggs is just brilliant. I mean, I was talking about, you know, the Cardinals and the Bucs both being undone this week by the fact that they've turned over the football. Well, you know, that's a player in Diggs the Cowboys have got who pretty much is on track for, what's he tracking at? 8 turnovers, eight picks this season, something like that. I mean, he's turning over the ball, you know, once a game for that team. And then you've got Dak Prescott. I mean, Dak Prescott, we talked about, is he going to be the same player coming back from that injury? I think he absolutely is. I think he is putting together a season that now some of that MVP chatter starts to dissipate from Lamar Jackson after some pretty ordinary performances from Baltimore. Is Dak Prescott now, you know, in the mix for the MVP conversation? So we've got the Chiefs who've, you know, shown they've got that high ceiling, but can they do it consistently? We've got the Cowboys who, you know, if they put it all together and beat the Chiefs this week, I think probably go to be most people's Super Bowl favourites, don't they? I mean, tell me a team we've seen better than the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one with Trevon Diggs. I know you've shouted him out, but I mean, literally all he does in a game is get a pick. In terms of it, the rest of his passing, like his grading is terrible because he allows so many receptions, but it's because he just jumps every route and hopes that he gets an interception. So I do think it's maybe just a slightly misleading stat to just look at his 8 interceptions and thinks, oh, he's brilliant. And I do think, you know, it's turnovers that change games, let's be honest. So I do think he's got that going in his favour massively. But
some corners only have like 8 interceptions in a career, though. Come on, I mean, this guy is
I know he's phenomenal at it, but I mean, if you jump every route, chances are that you'll snag one and let 5 go. But that aside, I mean, he's having a stellar year in terms of the interception numbers. the Cowboys, I think, seem really rounded on offense this year. And I think obviously having your star quarterback back in the lineup makes a hell of a big difference. But, I think people like Cooper and others are continually being amongst the best receivers in the league, and they've got a real good group. Like you said, Pollard is taking snaps from Ezekiel Elliott, and certainly I don't think he's unjustly taking those snaps. I don't think Zeke's played particularly well, but I think the 1-2 punch that they've got plays well. So, ultimately that's what makes the difference. With the Chiefs, I don't, it's really difficult to know where they're at because, again, like James's point always is consistency, and they are incredibly inconsistent on offense. Mahomes has a 400-yard, 5-touchdown performance this week, and then you look back last week and it was a stinker. So you just don't know when offense is going to turn up. I think Kelsey's having a quietly good season in and amongst that kind of up and down offense. I mean, I think he still leads all tight ends in targets, receptions and touchdowns. So, even in a bad year, Kelsey is again leading the league. But I just think the one thing that continues to let the Chiefs down is that defense. And I think they did better against what was admittedly a bit of a shambles of an offensive performance from Derek Carr, really. I saw several attempts at him just flinging the ball up in the air and hoping that somebody came down with it. And inevitably it was a Chief that came down with it. But yeah, I just don't, I do think that Chiefs defense is still a weakness, and against such a high octane Dak Prescott led offense, I think you're going to get punished. So yeah, I don't know. But then again, the Chiefs could turn up and put a 500-yard performance on and you just wouldn't blink an eye, would you? So who knows?
I think you're right in that I think this is the potential, if it lives up to expectations, to be a real heavyweight clash. I think we saw yesterday a bit of what the Chiefs can do when they play like the Chiefs that we expect them to do, but those kind of things have been few and far between. Whereas I think with the Cowboys, what we really saw is when they want to drop the hammer, they will absolutely crush it. And if I had to bet money on one of these teams outclassing the other, I think at the moment it'd be the Cowboys. I would definitely take Dak over Mahomes. I would take the running back combination that the Cowboys have got in Pollard and Zeke against kind of what the Chiefs are offering. And you'd probably even say, well, I'd take the Cowboys wide receiving core over the Chiefs wide receiving core. The big problem in comparison between the two is the defense, and the Cowboys have got the better defense. That I don't think that's really a question. I think we've talked long and hard about the fact that the Chiefs defense is the weakness in that franchise and the Cowboys one is just better. So I think it's a good shout out as a really good game to watch. I think it's got a lot to offer and should be very exciting, although I reserve the right to change my mind once we're through the first quarter and it's been absolutely nothing but punts all day, every day.
For me, this one is the Cowboys are an offensive powerhouse, and actually they're playing really well on D at the moment as well, getting a lot of turnovers. So, it's not just the air attack either. I think Dak makes them such a better prospect than they've had, last year when Dalton and DiNucci and were having to quarterback the team. And they've got, one of the better wide receiver groups in the league as well. I'd say top 5, if not better than that. And it looks like Ezekiel Elliott's kind of getting his game together as well, which is obviously a bonus for them. And it makes them a bit of a dual threat offense rather than just everybody knowing they're going to pass the ball. The Chiefs, it looks like they're kind of getting their act together a little bit. They dominated the Raiders at the weekend in a really good performance, which is, miles away from how they've been performing lately. And there was a bit of a bad atmosphere around the place. Some of the comments in the press about the toxic fan base and all that kind of stuff from Tyrann Mathieu and a couple of the other guys. So I think them starting to have a Chiefs-like performance with the 5 touchdowns from Mahomes. I think that probably is going to give them a little bit of confidence back. I still don't think they are where they were over the last couple of years. I don't think they're the same kind of threat that everybody, would go up and think, we're going to lose to the Chiefs today. I think they're a beatable team. I think this is going to be, like you said, Rob, I think this is going to be a cracking game of football and arguably the game of the week. We all expect it to be a massive offensive showdown, so it's probably going to end 10-7 or something like that, and be a real defensive chess match. But it's going to be an interesting game and hopefully a good game. And it's probably a bit of a coin toss as to which way it's going to go, I think.
But it's Dallas that I'm putting in Club Dub. So you all know how it works. Now we've got our NFL picks and predictions in the rear view. It's a quick once around our virtual room with this week's hot topic, which is simply this. In a season with so much inconsistency, even amongst the great teams, I'm going to ask you as we head into the stretch and head towards the playoffs, what would you rather have? A superstar quarterback or a true mastermind head coach? Aldrin, I'm coming to you first.
I really struggle because I feel like a really top tier elite quarterback is your coach on the field. And sometimes I think they can make a real difference. Equally, I think if you look at what the Patriots are doing at the minute with not a stellar, group of quarterbacks or receivers playing really solid, efficient football and against solid, efficient defense. But I don't know, as a person that just loves watching big splash plays and, as I said, enjoys watching somebody put a 40 burger on another team, I do feel like it's those elite top tier quarterbacks that make the difference. So for me, I would always pick a quarterback, but yeah, it's a close one.
So Aldrin, quick one. You've just picked them out and I was just talking about the other here. So who's going deeper in the playoffs, Patriots or Chiefs?
I think the Chiefs, because I think when Mahomes gets it going, he makes a heck of a lot more difference than Mac Jones. So I would arguably say the Chiefs. Equally, I think both teams have got stellar coaches. So I don't think
I was going to say, yeah,
too
Andy
far
Reid, maybe
apart.
it's a little bit harsh of me to then again, I think Bill Belichick, a few more rings on his fingers. But okay, all right, nice. JB, I'm over to you.
I think I would rather have the head coach because I think we have seen head coaches scheme fantastic games out of average players, and we have seen head coaches overcome the limitations that they have around them. Yeah, a great quarterback can kind of be your general on the field, but you're not always going to have a great quarterback. Like, if you were absolutely guaranteed you were going to have a great quarterback all the time, great, but you still need someone to actually execute everything, and the quarterback can't do everything themselves, as we have seen from teams where they've tried to do that. I think you look at the success of guys like Sean McVay, of Kyle Shanahan, in getting amazing things out of almost a kind of a revolving door of quarterbacks at times, then I can't imagine a world where you would say I would rather have a quarterback than a head coach.
Do you not see that Sean McVay example as the prime reason why you need a really good quarterback and not just a good coach? Because when paired with Jared Goff, he couldn't quite get them over the line. If they had Aaron Rodgers last year, do you think they're a better team?
Yes, but we have also seen Aaron Rodgers play in Green Bay for 15 years now? Let's say over a decade, without being specific on it. How many times has Aaron Rodgers been in the Super Bowl? Once. How many times has Aaron Rodgers won the Super Bowl? Once. You have to have both to be able to do it. And yeah, Sean McVay with Jared Goff was able to get to the Super Bowl, but that to me says more about Sean McVay than it does Jared Goff, because as was proven yesterday, Jared Goff has never won an NFL game without Sean McVay.
I disagree on that because the Rams had the coach with Goff and, got to the Super Bowl, but ultimately didn't get over the line in one of the dullest Super Bowls of recent years. So I would rather have the quarterback. And I think ultimately you want both, don't you? But I think, the obvious example is to look at the Buccaneers, who were a team that missed the playoffs the previous season. They had, arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. They added a couple of other bits and turned into Super Bowl winners. So, that's an overnight turnaround just by adding the right quarterback. If you use the Rams example as well, they had Goff and were all right, wins, a few wins, few losses each season, all that kind of stuff. Playoff team, but not brilliant. Look at their performance in the playoffs last year as an example when they lost Goff and had Wolford in. And I just think if you look at them now as a team with Stafford instead, they're a much better prospect, and that's by adding the quarterback. So I think it's a tricky one. I think a good coach, you look at Belichick, for example, I suppose is the exception to that rule, isn't it? Where a good coach can win you games, even if your quarterback isn't a star.
So I round out a hot topic, and do you know what? I hope it's quarterback. I think Arizona have a true franchise quarterback and possibly a guy with many years ahead of him, let's hope, of healthy and competitive football, who could probably be the best ever in Arizona. And that's not to say we haven't had good QBs, but you could argue that Kurt Warner, you could probably argue Carson Palmer, as good as they were in Cardinal Red, probably enjoyed their best years elsewhere in a weird kind of way. For me, I hope quarterback. But I do think it's going to be fascinating as we get to the sharp end to look at coaches like Cliff Kingsbury, coaches like Sean McDermott, coaches like Sean McVay, who've still not quite done it, still not quite put it all together. Even Mike Vrabel. I mean, I think it could be interesting to see what Tennessee do, all of a sudden being on the run there on maybe they're a deep threat all of a sudden again and a Super Bowl contender. I really hope quarterback. But maybe this Sunday will start to give us more clues. Maybe this year will be the year where we can answer that definitively once and for all. But gentlemen, it's been stellar. And before we say goodbye, JB, I'm handing over to you as our keeper of all things relating to scoring competition to tell us how we all did last week and what that means to the season scores.
So fans of the Club Dub Football Podcast will recognise that we are recording on Monday night today, so there is still a game to go. However, as all of us have picked the Rams, there is going to be no change in the totals this week, and therefore we can congratulate Phil on his third victory of the season, taking it 7-6. Aldrin and I both quite close with 6 and 7, and Rob didn't do as well as the rest of us. And that's the nicest way to say that. So we currently stand at Phil with 3 wins, Rob with 3 wins, and Aldrin and I sharing 2 wins each.
And on that absolute bombshell, be sure, listeners, to follow us on social. You can have your say on who you think the runners and riders will be this week, who you think will be finding their way into Club Dub. But from all of us, we'll catch you again in 7, possibly, with the way we're scheduled, even 8 days' time. But gentlemen, amazing as always. See you next week.
Cheers, Rob.
Thanks a lot.
This is amazing.
Remember to subscribe and be cool. Tell your friends.
The game is over.